Welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Today is Monday, August 25th, day 689 of the war. Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our military correspondent, Emanuel Fabian. Hi, Manny. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Amanda.
The Israeli Air Force yesterday carried out strikes in Yemen's Houthi-led capital of Sanaa, reportedly killing at least 4 people and injuring scores. Manny will fill us in on this stepped-up attempt at deterrence. We will learn what is happening on the ground in Gaza, especially around Gaza City, as call-up orders are being received by tens of thousands of reservists ahead of the planned takeover. All of this and more when we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our military correspondent, Emanuel Fabian. Yesterday, the Israeli Air Force carried out strikes in Sanaa, targeting a military compound where Yemen's presidential palace is located, a fuel depot, and 2 power stations. The strike came shortly after the military said that an IAF investigation into Friday night's ballistic missile attack, this comes after also an unmanned vehicle attack from Yemen, found for the first time that the Houthis used a projectile with a cluster bomb warhead. Let's start with the warhead and then talk about the deterrent strike. So, Manny, what is a cluster bomb warhead?
So we're talking about the same kind of missile that the Houthis have been firing at Israel for more than a year now. The missile's the same, but the warhead is different. So instead of carrying a warhead of several hundred kilograms, it's a warhead that opens up during its descent, and it deploys several smaller submunitions that will hit targets in a sort of a wider area. It's important to note that these submunitions are not guided. They just simply fall to the ground, so there's no accuracy here. And it's different from other types of sort of projectiles that have submunitions that each one are guided and each one can hit different targets. So it's not that advanced, and it's very similar and probably exactly the same as what Iran fired at Israel during the war in June. Iran fired at least 2, the 2 that Israel knows about because they weren't intercepted. We had one in central Israel, one in Beersheba, where these missiles basically opened up in the air and deployed. In the Iranian case, they deployed around 20 submunitions. In the Houthis case, the army thinks around 3 submunitions, and one of them did strike at the yard of a home in a central town, not causing significant damage. The windows were broken there, but not more than that. But it is definitely something new coming from the Houthis, but the actual missile itself isn't really any different because it's the same method of intercepting it. The army says that the failure to intercept it in this case is unrelated to the type of warhead, and it's continuing to investigate why it failed to intercept it in this case.
And the missiles that the Houthis are using, they're all Iranian made, right?
Oh, they're all Iranian made. The Houthis are thought to have done some modifications, I would say, to their missiles. So basically, because Yemen is much further away than Iran is to Israel, the Houthis normally reduce the size of the warhead and increase the fuel in the missile to get them to fly further and actually reach Israel. So even their big warheads were smaller than what the Iranians were firing at Israel in June. And in this case, with the submunitions, we're talking about less submunitions than what the Iranians were firing, basically just to try and get them to reach Israel, because otherwise they don't have that range.
Right, to accommodate the fuel. So on the same day, on Friday, I just happened to be speaking with one of my children who are soldiers, and he said, whoa, this unmanned vehicle is flying overhead. It's about the size of a car. And this also was sent by the Houthis on Friday. I understand that it was shot down with no destruction at all, correct?
Yeah, the Houthis fired a drone, an explosive drone at Israel on Friday. They claim to have fired 2, but it seems like the other one didn't even reach Israel's borders, wasn't even detected. And this drone managed to penetrate Israel's borders. It flew over the Gaza border area over several towns, sort of crossing from Egypt into Israel and then passing by Gaza border communities, where it was intercepted by the Iron Dome ground-based air defense system. Fighter jets tried to shoot it down, but it's sort of a bit more dangerous to do that over residential areas, of course, because there's a risk of missing the drone, and then you have a missile that could strike an urban area. So the army is very careful in those cases once it does cross the border. In many other cases, these drones are shot down before crossing the borders or crossing over the border in unpopulated areas, and then it's easier to shoot them down.
Right. So these drones and these missiles are not rare occurrences in Israel. And apparently Israel said yesterday that it had had enough yet again and conducted a strike on Sanaa. What makes this strike any different than the other previous strikes that obviously did nothing to deter the Houthis?
I don't think this one will do much to deter them anyway. But it is slightly more significant. 4 targets were hit this time. Not like the Israeli army hasn't done this sort of thing in the past, but the last couple strikes were more minor, I would say. This one is slightly more significant. 4 targets, the presidential palace, according to the army, the presidential palace or the military compound surrounding it is used by the Houthis to direct strikes on Israel. But according to local media in Yemen, the palace had been abandoned for many years and wasn't actually used as a palace. The fuel depot is what you could see in all the videos and photos going around from Yemen. Big fire, and a huge fireball up in the air. That's the fuel depot, and then the power stations. I think one of them Israel has targeted in the past already. There's been several power stations that the IDF has targeted in Yemen. It doesn't seem to really be affecting the Houthis' ability to launch missiles at Israel, but the IDF says that the power stations are, of course, also used by the Houthis for military purposes.
Okay, we are going to speak about Gaza in the second half of the program, but before we get to our break, the Israeli army uprooted thousands of olive trees in the West Bank village, an area about 300 dunams over the past 3 days following a shooting attack in the area last week carried out by a resident, according to reports in Palestinian media. In addition, a 3-day curfew was imposed on this village, which was lifted Sunday morning. And the big accusation against the army right now for this village of Manny, correct me if I'm wrong, al-Mughayyir, the big accusation against the army right now is that the army is doing collective punishment against the residents. So what can you tell us about this?
So the chief of the Central Command, Avi Bluth, visited the scene just outside al-Mughayyir on Thursday, and he said that the residents of this village need to pay a heavy price for the shooting attack the previous day. And it appeared from his words that he was saying that this was a sort of collective punishment against the town. He said that they're locking in on the village and they're going to deliver a message to the village, and they're going to first hunt down the terrorists and then carry out operations there so that the village will be deterred from carrying out attacks. It really did seem from his words that he was implying that the demolition or the uprooting of these olive trees was intended as a punishment. But the IDF later came out with a statement denying that the moves were intended as collective punishment and said that it was actually a security need in the area. The claim that the army is making is that after this attack was carried out, this Palestinian gunman who had opened fire on Israelis didn't hit any and then engaged in sort of a fight with them. He had fled the area through this vegetation on the side of a road, and the vegetation was concealing and obstructing the view of the area for the army to identify attackers. So therefore it removed these olive trees on the edge of the village. The IDF also condemned the remarks made against Bluth. There's been lots of talk about, people have been saying that his remarks are basically indicate that he was supportive of collective punishment, and people have been calling him a war criminal. So the IDF has condemned those remarks and said that he only acts out of operational considerations. And it's a bit of an odd story, and I hope the army provides some maybe more evidence as to why it's necessary to uproot all of these trees in the area. From the videos we saw, it doesn't look like they're that close to the road, but I could be wrong. I haven't visited the scene and seen it myself. And additionally, Mughayyir isn't, there hasn't been that many attacks coming from that village. Of course, it's not It's not like Jenin or Nablus, where I can understand the army demolishing structures in the area. And again, this attack also was a little bit unusual. He opened fire, but he didn't hit anybody, and then was engaged in a fight. The suspect was also detained just a few hours after the attack. So, is it really sort of needed to continue to demolish it afterwards once the suspect has already been caught? I'm not sure, but hopefully the army will come out with more information as to this operation in the area.
Where is this village located, Mandy?
It's in the central West Bank area. The attack itself was just outside Mughayyir, near the settlement of Adayad.
Okay. Very confusing story, so I'm sure you're following it, and we will go to a break now. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our military correspondent, Emanuel Fabian. Israeli planes and tanks pounded the eastern and northern outskirts of Gaza City overnight Saturday and into Sunday, destroying buildings and homes, residents said, as the IDF increased its troop presence in northern Gaza as part of an offensive aimed at bolstering the army's control in the area. This is coming ahead of the planned operation to take over Gaza City. Yesterday, we had remarks from IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, who said when he was visiting a Haifa naval base, according to Channel 13 News, he said, "There's a hostage deal on the table. We need to take it." Zamir added, the IDF brought about the conditions for a deal. Now it is in Netanyahu's hands. These remarks were not confirmed by the IDF, as far as I understand, Manny, but some remarks were released from this visit to the Haifa naval base. What are you hearing from official IDF remarks? And then we'll talk about this hot mic comment.
So officially, the army put out a press statement and highlighted the fact that Zamir said that the military has created the conditions for a hostage deal with Hamas. And he said that the IDF had met the objectives of the Gideon's Chariots operation against Hamas in Gaza. And, quote, as a result of the military pressure, we created the conditions for the release of the hostages. I think that is quite telling as to what the military's position is. And I think this, I wouldn't say it confirms the comments published by Channel 13, but it's definitely in line with it, and it does seem to me to be accurate remarks. The IDF is preparing and ready to go into Gaza City and carry out this offensive, but we know that Zamir, during the cabinet, the infamous cabinet meeting when Netanyahu and the defense minister instructed the army to carry out this offensive, he presented alternatives and said we should do it in a different way, in a way that is both easier on the army, because of course the army's been fighting for nearly 2 years now, and also is less risky for the hostages being held in the area. And he was of course overruled, and he was instructed to capture Gaza City instead. So it's no secret that the army is, I would say, hesitant to carry this out. It also has called up all these reservists who are supposed to show up on September 2nd. It's hard to say how many of them will actually show up. It's been, for some of them, they're showing up for their maybe 6th or 7th time in reserve duty. But it is clear to me that the IDF is still trying to get the political level to go forward with a deal so that it has more time for the troops to rest, for them to prepare for maybe future operations in Gaza, to not have the reservists sort of show up, again and again. And I think that's the army's position here. So
it sounds like from what you're saying that it's more an issue of the timing of the operation than the actual desire to take over the city or not.
I think both. The timing definitely is one, and we've even heard Netanyahu put out a statement saying that he's instructed the IDF to even expedite the timeline for the capture of Gaza City. So it's also the timeline, but it's also having to capture Gaza City when we know that Hamas is holding hostages there, and there's a risk to the hostages if the IDF operates in Gaza City, and anywhere else in Gaza for that matter. There's a reason why the IDF has not pushed into the central camps in Gaza and into the western portion of Gaza City. It's because Hamas is holding hostages in those areas. So it's not just that, and additionally the reservists, the IDF has tried to promise the reservists that they would only serve for 70 days a year. which is, of course, an increase of what it used to be. It was like 42 days every 2 years in the past before the war, and has, the 70-day promise has completely been broken already for pretty much every reservist. And the IDF needs time to recuperate. Thousands of soldiers have been injured in the war. The army is also missing manpower. It's missing 10,000 or even 12,000 soldiers, according to some officials. And it really needs time to sort all of those issues out. And a ceasefire deal would be great for the army, because it would give it time to figure all these things out and draft more soldiers and train them. And these things take a long time.
Okay, let's talk about what is actually happening on the ground in Gaza. Of course, we're hearing about operations in the outskirts of Gaza City, in the suburbs, shall we say, but that's not the only place where the army is operating in Gaza. So what is happening right now, Manny?
So in northern Gaza, there are operations in Jabalia, which is north of Gaza City. There are 2 brigades there now, the 401st and Givati. And then sort of to the south of Gaza City, or I would say southeast, in the Zaytun neighborhood, the Nahal Brigade and 7th Brigade are operating. They're not pushing deep into Gaza City yet, not into the western side where most of the civilians are. But we did see reports over the weekend that troops had also entered the Sabra neighborhood, which is next to Zaytun, but slightly more central, where civilians were, and I think most of them have actually packed up and left. We have not yet seen the IDF issue a widespread evacuation warning for all of Gaza City, and it is expected to do so, because that's what the political level instructed the army to do, is to evacuate all the civilians. But it will happen. We're already seeing the IDF give warnings to medical officials in northern Gaza to prepare to evacuate all their equipment and their staff to southern Gaza, where hospitals are being prepared for them. And we've also already seen these preparations in southern Gaza.
So there are, of course, rumors flying that the last functioning hospital in Gaza was just now told to pack up and move out. But that's not quite accurate, is it, Manny?
No, there are hospitals in Gaza that are operating. It's a little bit confusing because the hospitals, as they used to be, are... Many of them have been closed because of the army operations in those areas, but there are field hospitals in Gaza, some run by the Red Cross, some by the other sort of countries. There's one by the UAE in Gaza as well. In terms of actual hospital buildings, in southern Gaza and Khan Yunis, the European hospital, where, of course, Mohammed Sinwar was killed in an airstrike, and the IDF later raided the facility and seized his body along with other top Hamas commanders. The IDF didn't actually damage the hospital building itself, not significantly during this operation. And over the weekend, the military enabled Palestinians to actually enter the hospital, medical teams and engineering teams to clean up and renovate the hospital. So it's prepared for when all these civilians from Gaza City are evacuated to the south of the Strip. Of course, when they evacuate all the civilians to the south, naturally these hospitals in North Gaza will not be operating anymore. But that's only because of the army operations in those areas. But we are seeing that there are medical facilities in southern Gaza and even in central Gaza where the civilians currently are.
I want to back up to something that you said earlier about how the IDF was spotted operating in one of the neighborhoods inside Gaza City. And if I'm not mistaken, the report stated something like tanks have been seen inside this part of the city. So can you just explain a little bit more what it looks like on the ground when the IDF actually rolls into an operation in an area?
So we will know when there's a major offensive happening, mainly because there will be reports of heavy airstrikes or even artillery fire generally before tanks push into an area. The IDF softens, it's a military term, but softens the area with artillery shelling. One, to cause any civilians who may still be there to leave, and also to confuse any Hamas operatives that may be hiding in tunnels or in buildings. And then the tanks will move in, and then infantry forces as well will be with them. And then afterwards, sort of towards the back, is the combat engineers who will go and demolish the buildings that the army has sort of taken control of, or tunnels that the army has taken control of. But they'll do that towards the back line, not on the front line, because generally the army wants to establish control of an area and then demolish all the Hamas infrastructure and search for the remaining Hamas infrastructure. So right now those operations are being carried out in Zaytun, and then we're seeing, according to these reports, tanks also push in slightly deeper into Sabra, which is another neighborhood. But it was only for a short period. I'm not sure if they're still there. They may have gone in and then withdrawn. It could be part of some sort of effort to try and lure Hamas out. But when the major offensive happens, we will know about it. It will be quite obvious when it happens. It's not going to be that secretive, and we won't have to rely on Palestinian reports for that. But we will, but it will be quite evident when it happens.
Okay, Manny, thank you so much. Of course, we are all waiting to find out what is meant to happen, both from the military and from the political echelons. So thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Please check out another installment tomorrow. This episode was produced by Adina Karpuch. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until tomorrow, shalom.